Let me read to you a passage from the 19th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 1 to 10. It's the Gospel for Tuesday of the 33rd week in Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." That's from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. What does it suggest to us? Well, it suggests conversion. You know, in 2009, Pope Benedict XVI declared the year to be a year of the priesthood. He proposed that the Church contemplate especially St. John Vianney, the famous Curé of Ars in 19th century France. The Curé of Ars has been declared by the Church to be patron saint of parish priests. I can remember some 50 years ago a priest who went on to be the provincial superior of his religious order. He himself had never served a term working in a parish, and he took St. John Vianney as his patron saint. The fact is that the Curé of Ars was a remarkable religious prodigy. He was a great saint, and from his backwater parish in France, he had a remarkable reputation and influence. Archbishop Ullathorne of Birmingham in England once visited his parish to speak with the curé, and he saw numerous people sleeping in the fields awaiting their turn to go to confession. Now, if one reads his life, and there are several, a notable thing about him, about St. John Vianney, is that from his earliest years he had a remarkable propensity for religious faith. He received his first Holy Communion with the most profound reverence. I'm not aware that there was what we would normally call a conversion in his life. Doubtless, of course, all through his life there were daily conversions from sin, and he was acutely aware of sin in his life, as are all the saints. But there was no notable turning point, because he always seemed to be growing in grace. The case is very different with vast numbers of good and holy persons. Due to the grace of God, they undergo conversions. Archbishop Ullathorne, that I mentioned a minute ago, himself underwent a conversion while at Mass in Memel. In his autobiography at page 34, he explains it. That was at Mass as a young person, and his famous and brilliant friend, John Henry Newman, underwent a profound conversion at age 15, as we read in his Apologia, page 4. St. Paul underwent a conversion on the way to Damascus. Augustine underwent his conversion after years of sin and heresy. The fact is that God calls people to himself in thousands of ways. Our gospel today that I read earlier gives us one of those ways, and it certainly involved a dramatic conversion. Imagine that gospel scene. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector of Jericho and had done extremely well, but had compromised himself seriously and repeatedly in the business of garnering his wealth. Would anyone have regarded him as having spiritual potential? Scarcely. And yet, There was something in him that drew him in a spiritual direction, for he was anxious to see Jesus. He ran ahead of where Jesus was going, for he could not catch a glimpse of him for the crowd. Jesus was holy. He exercised the power of God. He was a great prophet. God was in him. So Zacchaeus ran ahead and climbed the tree, which he could see Jesus would be approaching. It is a beautiful scene, but something much more beautiful was about to happen. Our Lord did not just deal with crowds, he dealt with individuals. For instance, on one occasion, he was pressed by the crowd while on his way to heal someone who was seriously ill. Suddenly he stopped and asked who touched him. Everything came to a halt, and Jesus carefully looked around, his penetrating gaze searching the crowd. Someone had touched him, and as a result had been healed. The unknown woman came forward, and then received the loving assurance of Jesus that her faith had saved her. Christ is interested in each individual, and so it was that as Jesus moved along with the crowd around and behind him, he suddenly stopped and looked up. A smile came across his face as he addressed the chief tax collector by name. He had immediately plumbed the heart of Zacchaeus, and he asked him to come down from the tree, for he was going to dine in his house that day. Zacchaeus clambered down, with his heart in a process of profound change. The fact that Zacchaeus' name is given in the Gospel account suggests that he became a faithful disciple, and it all began with this dramatic conversion. What does this tell us? It tells us that Christ can change the life of anyone if there is but an opening. He can change our lives too, if like Zacchaeus we truly want to see him. Every saint is a model for all of us, but there is something special that the converted saint offers us. It is the lesson that grace can overcome sin. Grace can transform us. Let us place ourselves in the company of Zacchaeus and run ahead, as it were, to see Jesus. Let us climb that tree and receive the loving gaze of Jesus Christ as he asks us to come down and receive him into the house of our soul. Let us receive him every day, for he wants to abide with us constantly. He asks that, like Zacchaeus, we renounce sin and make him our friend. He asks for ongoing conversion from sin, all sin. His love will enable us to do this, because with his love has come grace, that grace that changes the heart of the sinner and sets him on the path of sanctity.